Hello, in this video, I'll be talking about the drag and drop module from Angular Material. The module allows us to easily apply drag and drop capabilities to any elements on the page. We can move an element around the page, reorder items in a list, and even move items from one list to another. Before we begin, make sure to add Angular Material to your project. In the terminal, execute the ng add command for Angular Material. Select a theme, set up the typography, and enable Angular animations. To begin using the drag and drop module, add the DragDropModule to your project. Go to the app module file, add the import statement, and add it to the app. Go to the HTML page and add a div element so we have something to drag. Add some content for the div and set the width, height, background color, and alignment of the content. To add the basic drag and drop feature to an element, apply the CDK drag directive to the element. Instead of allowing the element to be dragged anywhere on the page, we can create a bounding box to prevent it from going out of it. In the HTML page, add another div element and give it an ID. Go to the CSS file and set the width, height, and border of the bounding box. Go back to the HTML page. Put the draggable element inside. Apply the CDK drag boundary input to it. And pass in the CSS selector for the bounding box element. Since the bounding box is using an ID, the selector will be hashtag and then the name. If it were a class, it will be a period. We can also add handles to the elements to restrict the draggable area. Inside the drag item, add a div element and add the handle class to it. Go to the CSS file and define the selector for the handle class. Set the position to absolute, bottom and left to 1em, width and height to 40 pixels, and background color to red. Then set the position of the drag box to relative so the absolute position will be applied. Go back to the HTML page and add the cdkDragHandle directive to the div to indicate that the element is a handle. If we try to drag outside of the handle, it will not move. Another thing we can do is to lock the movement of the drag item. To allow the element to go to the up and down direction only, apply the cdkDropListAxis input and set it to Y. For left and right, use X. Now let's see how we can use the DragDropModule to move and reorder elements in a list. Go to a component TypeScript file and create an array. Go to the HTML page of the component. Add a div element and apply the cdkDropList directive to it. This will indicate that this element will be the container of a list. Inside the DropList container, add another div element and use the ng-for directive to loop through all the elements in the array. For the content, use interpolation to insert the value. Lastly, apply the cdkDrag directive to enable dragging. If we go to the browser, we should be able to drag each element, but it will not reorder it when we drop it. Go to the CSS file and add a CSS class for drag item. Set the padding, border, and background color. In the HTML page, apply the style to the drag items. To swap and reorder the items when we drop the item, apply the cdkDropListDrop event to the list container and assign it a function. Then add the array data using the cdkDropListData input and passing the array. In the TypeScript file, import cdkDragDrop and move item and array from Angular material. Define the drop function inside the function, call the move item and array function. It takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the array we're reordering, which we can get by grabbing the event object, accessing the container, and taking the data. The second argument is the previous index of the drag element, and the third is the current index of the element we're trying to swap. If we save the project and go to the browser, the elements will be reordered when we drag and drop the items. We can also style and animate the drop effects. Right now, when we drag on an item, we have a plain preview, and when we drop the item, it goes in instantly. To change this, go to the CSS file. To apply some styles to the preview, add the cdkDropPreview class selector and add some styles. To change the style of the placeholder, use cdkDropListPlaceholder. To animate the drop list events, use CDK, drag, animating, and set the transition attribute. We can also animate the placeholder as they are reordering by using cdkDropListDragging along with cdkDrag. Instead of having a vertical orientation, we can change it to horizontal as well. Go to the HTML page. Apply the cdkDropList orientation input to the container and set it to horizontal. Then set the display to flex. Another thing we can do is to set a custom preview image instead of using the default one. Add an image element inside the drag item, and then apply the cdkDropPreview directive to the element and set the source. Now let's see how we can link multiple drop lists together. Go to the TypeScript file and add another array. In the HTML page, create two drop list elements for the two arrays. To link both lists together, all we have to do is to put the list inside of a container. Create a div element and apply the cdkDropListGroup directive to it. Then move all the drop list content inside. If we go to the browser, we should be able to drag items from one list to the other. To transfer the items, add the cdkDropListDrop event to handle the drop events. Go to the TypeScript file and import transfer array item from Angular material. Locate the onDrop function earlier. Since we're dealing with multiple drop lists with one function, we need to check if the item that was dropped is from the same list or from another one. Use the if statement and check if the previous container is the same as the current container. If it is, call the moveItemInArray function to reorder the items. If not, we want to call the transferArrayItem function to transfer the items from one list to the other. It takes 4 arguments. The first is the data from the previous container. The second is the data from the current container. And the third and fourth arguments is for the previous and current index of the item. If we save the project and go to the browser, we should be able to move the items between both lists. Instead of using the cdkDropListGroup container to connect the list, we can specify which list we want to connect with. In the HTML page, move all the drop list content out of the drop list group. Provide an ID for both lists. To connect the ownAnimal drop list to the animal wish list, apply the cdkDropListConnectedTo input and pass in the array of the drop list item that you want to connect with. If we save the project and go to the browser, we should be able to transfer the items from the ownAnimal drop list to the animal wish list. However, we cannot transfer the items back because we did not specify that the animal wish list is connected to the ownAnimal drop list. To connect them, apply the cdkDropListConnectedTo input to the animal wish list and pass in the ownAnimal drop list ID. That's all for this video. If you find this video helpful, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to support the channel.